Welcome, everybody. Today we have a remarkable show. We are featuring one of our Exceptional Women awardees. It is the Honorable Ellen McCarthy. She is the former Assistant Secretary of Intelligence under 4 different administrations. She has so much to share with us, and especially will let us know what she's getting into now, which is very, very interesting. I'm Lorraine Siegel. I'm the founder, chair, and CEO of the Exceptional Women Awardees Foundation. Our mission is to enable high-level women to rise to meet their dreams. Why did I start this foundation? Well, I never had a mentor. As a young woman, early in my career in law and then running a number of different companies, and even as a board director, I never had a guide to show me the way. And I wanted to be sure that women who walk the road less traveled, like Ellen has and I have and many other before me and after me, would always be surrounded by a supportive group of high-level women who would show them the way and help them to get there. And that's exactly what we do at the Exceptional Women Awardees Foundation. And so I am so delighted to present to you one of our EWAs, and that is the Honorable Ellen McCarthy. And before we get there, let's watch a little video about what she's into now.
Today, we have access to massive amounts of information. And while this has clear advantages, there are also more serious consequences at play. The constant barrage of information makes it much easier for countries to wage disinformation campaigns. And nothing less than our democracy is at stake.
Ellen, welcome.
Lorraine, thank you. So good to be here.
I'm so delighted. And there's so much I want to ask you. So let's just start at the beginning. How did you get into the intelligence world?
You know, I would love to say it was this deep passion to work in the intelligence community, but it really was just an opportunity. And I thought, you know, I'll try this for 2 years. I was a reporter at a newspaper, and my former boss, the publisher of the newspaper, actually said, you know, have you ever thought about intelligence? And I never had. And so I really thought Hunt for Red October was the #1 book at that time. You know, submarines were sort of cool. And so I had an opportunity to start as a submarine analyst at the Office of Naval Intelligence. And, you know, it was not 2 years. It would be many, many, many years. Once you get into the IC, there's just no going back.
That's amazing. So you started off in naval intelligence. Do you get seasick, just as an aside?
No, actually, you know, it's funny, Lorraine. I actually love to sail. And that was actually one reason why naval intelligence was so compelling. You know, I thought I would do it for a couple of years and then move back to Annapolis, Maryland, get my golden retriever and my sailboat and sail away.
Well, now you can do that, but of course you're too busy to do that. And then you went to the Coast Guard. Is that correct?
It is. You know, it was the end of the Cold War. And I was living in Norfolk, Virginia at the time, and I was actually recruited to come back to Washington, D.C., to come work at the Coast Guard, help them with their mission, which is the Coast Guard is amazing, smaller than New York City Police Department, but what they do, everything from life-saving to counter-drug operations, was amazing. You know, when I made the move and left the Navy to come to the Coast Guard, all of my friends said, "Why are you going to the Coast Guard? They don't shoot anything." But post-Cold War, the Coast Guard was shooting a lot more things than the Navy was. And so I spent 6 years at the Coast Guard working that mission and helping them become a member of the United States intelligence community. It was a great run.
Wow, what a fabulous thing to undertake, and an incredible legacy to leave as well. And then you joined geospatial intelligence, which I always thought was to do with, you know, aliens and things like that, but obviously not. Tell us what that means.
So yes, I spent some time as the chief operating officer at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Such a big word, but it's a practice within the intelligence community whereby you have people who analyze and assess images that are derived from satellite systems or reconnaissance aircraft, and they provide a picture of what's actually happening on the Earth. That NGA is an amazing agency. Its counterpart is the National Security Agency, NSA, which of course does signals intelligence and communication work, and CIA, of course, which does human intelligence, and that is collecting information with spies on the ground.
So when you left that and went to the Defense Department, is that correct? Do I have that correct? Was that the next step?
I did. It was actually, it was before I went to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I spent some time working for the Secretary of Defense, who at that time was Donald Rumsfeld. My boss was Jim Clapper. We saw his photo, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. And I started doing policy there. It was just post 9/11. Congress had passed a law, the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act. And it really was all about trying to get all 17 intelligence community agencies to work better together so there would not be another 9/11. Interestingly enough, during my time there, though, Jim Clapper, who was not only my boss, but became an incredible mentor, appointed me to a new position where I ran human capital for all of the intelligence agencies that are aligned to the Department of Defense. So the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence, the National Reconnaissance Office. And it was my job to run human capital. And when he asked me to take that job on, I said, Director Clapper, I am not the HR lady. I don't even do my own performance assessment, much less having to oversee 50,000 other people's performance assessments. But, he really knew me better than me. And it turned out that I am a people person and that I am the HR lady. And I spent the next 3 years developing pay for performance systems, looking at how we train folks to actually work in the intelligence business. Turned out to be a fantastic job.
That's amazing, Ellen. Absolutely amazing. So when you think about this amazing career that you've had, just to talk about your government roles for a moment, what were the different aspects in the different agencies that you moved through? Because you moved through a number of different agencies. Were they different in their cultures? Tell us a little bit about that.
Lorraine, I think what sets me apart from most of my counterparts in the community is that for the most part, people will go to one agency and that's where they'll stay. So you go into CIA and you stay at CIA. As you mentioned, I moved across the community. I don't know if this was a case of I had ADHD or I think it was more that I just liked solving different problems. And so I actually spent time working 3 of the 4 pillars of national security, and that includes defense, law enforcement, and then of course policy went with my time at state. And what was so interesting is that the tradecraft or the way intelligence does is all the same, but you have to tailor that intelligence for your different consumers. So a policymaker, for example, intelligence is just one source of information that a policymaker uses when making a decision. They have all sorts of other information that they use to decide whether or not we're going to work with this country or not. Whereas in the defense and law enforcement side of the house, intelligence is much more precise. You need to provide a warfighter with some very specific information. Who's behind the door? Where's the submarine that you are targeting? And what was so fascinating about working in the law enforcement side at Coast Guard is that intelligence and law enforcement are very, very different. At the end of the day, law enforcement officers, they're motivated to get cases into court, to put bad people into jail. And, based on laws right now, intelligence can mess that up. You can actually, a law enforcement case can be completely done away with if intelligence is actually used to inform that whatever the case is. And so you have to be very, very careful in terms of making sure that law enforcement gets intelligence insights, but it doesn't compromise their investigation.
So in fact, Ellen, you are an internal diplomat. You're a diplomat internally from agency to agency, which is remarkable. You had mentioned Secretary Clapper, and I have to tell you that when we got his letter of recommendation recommending you to become part of EWA, when I shared it with our board, we've never seen anything quite like that. I mean, he sang your praises. He's not just a mentor to you, he considered you a mentor to him. So it is a remarkable statement on your accomplishments that such a human being is so supportive of you, and we congratulate you on that. I do want to put up another photo, though, because the moment of your swearing in was an important moment in your life. Tell us about that.
I have to say that there may have been only 2 other moments that were as special as that. And that was getting married to my husband and having my children, who were all in that picture. To the right is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, my husband, my mother, my brother, and my 2 children. And to have, and who's not in the photo, is pretty much everybody who I'd ever worked with throughout my many years in the community. I was actually signing my confirmation letter at that point. Secretary Pompeo had just sworn me in. And, to be able to get that time to actually look at everybody who means everything to you and thank them for everything they did to help you get there. It's just such a blessing. I mean, I'm still watering up. My eyes are just watering thinking about it. It was such a special day.
Well, obviously highly deserved by you, and everybody was so proud of you, as we are now proud to call you one of our sisters in EWA. So, Ellen, there's so many things I want to ask you about what's going on currently. I also want to get to what you're doing, because you're doing things that will actually change our world in such a positive way. I do want to encourage our audience to come on in and ask us questions, put them in the chat at LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you're watching this. And it will be, of course, recorded and become a podcast, and also be streamed on our YouTube channel. But let's go to current affairs, because obviously top of mind for everybody in the intelligence community and for everybody in the world is what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Your thoughts?
Well, first, it's absolutely horrific. I mean, I think it really just shows how life can change on a dime. I will tell you that I have spent this time reading so much about World War II and refreshing my understanding of World War II, because the similarities are just eye-watering. But it just also shows what people will do to fight for their families and to fight for democracy. And the whole world is really gathering behind Ukraine. Most of the world is gathering behind Ukraine to support them in that fight, that very well honored, well-deserved fight for democracy. I'll tell you the one thing that I'm most proud of, there's this part of me that's sort of sorry I'm not back in the intelligence community. I would go back in a second if given the opportunity. But I'm so proud of our community and what it's doing in terms of downgrading and releasing intelligence that really every person can see today. In fact, in the days, sort of going towards when Russia actually invaded Ukraine, you saw the Director of National Intelligence was actually releasing information that not only would help the American people understand what was going on, but sent a very strong message to President Putin about that we knew what he was doing and what his intentions were, despite an incredible disinformation campaign that he's running, to quite the contrary. The second really interesting point about this war, Lorraine, is that I think it's the first one that it's a case where anybody around the world can see through publicly available information exactly what's going on through social media. I mean, in some ways, I think the information that's in the open is probably more valuable than even the intelligence that is being collected from national technical means. It's just an incredibly transparent event that anyone who's interested can look at images and watch Russian troop movements and see what Ukrainian people are doing. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of like watching war as it's happening, which is scary. And it's just the thought of it. There are so many economic impacts that are happening because of this war. And the human toll is just beyond belief of how it's changing the face of Europe with the emigration of Ukrainians all over the world, in fact. So should we be concerned about China?
So I will tell you that, one of my concerns is that we're so focused on Ukraine that we may not be considering China. We may not be keeping an eye on China the way we should be. Not within my community. I'm pretty confident that they're still on board. China, I would argue, is probably our biggest national security issue at this point. The reality is that while we were fighting terrorism and while we were focused on lots of other things, China was changing its worldview. And, I find it very interesting to see what China is doing and not doing during this war with Russia and Ukraine. It's very interesting. Their President Xi, when he talks about great power, global power competition, for the first time ever, he talks about it in terms of the likelihood of war. And he's never really spoken that way before. And so I think that's something that we definitely need to keep an eye on. This shift from a chance that a war could happen with China. So I will say that, and then in terms of cyber threats, misinformation, disinformation, economic impacts, China's number one.
Yes, it is very concerning to think that two men, and one in particular, can change the way the world works. And that is terrifying, and it's Hitlerian in its way. We have a number of questions, so let's try and take a few of them. There's one I think we can bring up now from Teresa. Thanks, Teresa. If a successful female tech executive with top state government and private sector experience wants to break into the federal government, either as a political or career appointee, what do you recommend? Great question, Teresa. Thank you.
That is a great question, Teresa. I'll tell you, one point I want to make to the audience is while I was a political appointee, intelligence officers inherently are not political. As Lorraine indicated, I worked for 4 presidents from different parties. And it really didn't matter what their party is. Our motto, our mantra in the intelligence community is truth to power. So I just wanted to make that point. And then I'm going to answer your question. The really frustrating thing is that getting into government right now is no different today than it was in 1988 when I entered. And it really takes 2 things: being really good at what you know, whatever your expertise is, and having a network. And a network of folks who are connected to those in government, to those who can actually speak on your behalf. Just applying for open positions is not the best way to get in. So take advantage of your network, develop your network, make connections, develop friendships with folks who are in the various branches of government that you want, because they can then help sponsor you and then help you make that move in. I'll tell you, on the political front, when I got called to interview for the INR job, I thought it was a joke because I'm inherently not political. And so I think that it wasn't a joke, of course. I mean, I ended up taking that job. It was an incredible opportunity. But later on, I found out how it happened. And it really was because of my network across government, having worked in so many different organizations and investing and maintaining those relationships. And that's how it happened.
Ellen, you are actually a wonderful promotion for what EWA is all about, because we're a network across 40 different industries and the government sector. We have 2 women who are full-time government sector with the FBI and with ATF, and you yourself have just come out of that. And so, we try to bring in a couple of government sector women into what is primarily a business organization, a nonprofit. So it's so important to build a network, and I think many of us just work so hard and forget to do that. Let's bring up another one of the questions that has been coming in, and that: how do you decipher this is right in your wheelhouse. How do you decipher the authenticity of information regarding the war in media, and then also talk about your nonprofit and company, Ellen? It's a great segue.
I'm going to send Janice a check later for asking that question, so thank you so much. So the deciphering the authenticity of information is done a number of different ways. Of course, there's technical solutions whereby there are plenty of tools that are available in the marketplace that can help assess whether or not you're dealing with bots or with real people. But I'll tell you that the most important skill is critical thinking. And the funny thing is, I worked in the intelligence community for over 30 years. But none of us are born with critical thinking. We're not born to be that. It's something that comes with training and experience. And anybody can be a critical thinker. My training in the IC is no different than training that folks get in the business community. It's about making sure that you are confirming your sources. So don't just read one source. It's triangulating. It's reading something that you believe, but then also looking at other sides to an issue. It's not considering anything to be completely outlandish. When I wake up in the morning, first I play Wordle, but then I'll tend to read 3 media publications that are all slanted differently. And that really helps me get a sense of what's going on. And the second part of this, Lorraine, is you asked, how does this relate to my new venture? Just in the process of launching a nonprofit called the Truth in Media Cooperative. And, to Janice's point, and just as I reflect across my own life, we live in this digital age where we are all blessed with more information than certainly we had when I started, pre-Cold War, where pretty much you had the Washington Post and the Encyclopedia Britannica. But today, we pretty much can get information on anything: great restaurants, how to get to hospitals, how to get to a friend's house, how to fix your plumbing through YouTube. I mean, we have so much information out there, which is great. Our lives are easier as a result of that. But the dark side to all this is that it also means that information can be manipulated, and you don't always know if what you're reading is accurate or not, or true or not. And as a result, we've got this environment where other countries are looking at us right now. Because we have completely lost trust in just about anything. I saw that firsthand during my last rotation in government, where I think, and I know from the data, that trust in government organizations in the United States is at an all-time low. We don't trust media sources. We don't trust anything. And as a result, we've just stopped looking. It's just too hard. It's too much. There's just too much out there. And so my concern is, how are we going to fix some of these really big problems that we face looking to the future if we don't believe in anything, if we don't believe in our government? You know, I'm just so amazed. Recently, we put a Supreme Court justice into the Supreme Court, but even that process was so hyper politicized that it took forever. We wasted time. Again, this is not political commentary. I'm just very worried about the state of our country and this lack of trust. And so I've decided, thanks to EWA and a lot of coaching, that I want to spend my time trying to fix this. And I think one way you can fix this is really trying to change the paradigm in the media marketplace. You know, can you compel media organizations to develop and live by standards whereby they're providing truthful and accurate information? Can we create incentives for people to want to be better critical thinkers, to want to not just read and believe everything they see? Or can we create an environment whereby we are actually providing a model for the government to consider maybe doing some things differently? You know, maybe the intelligence community will take a cue from what they're doing right now with Ukraine and Russia, and actually start reporting intelligence to the American people in an unclassified format. And so this EWA cooperative is bringing together like-minded organizations, media outlets, to actually come together and work this problem. And there's so many really incredible people that want to fix this.
Amazing. Truth in Media Cooperative. That's really where the future is for our truth telling and our ability to understand what we're really reading and whether it's relevant and true. Wow. That will be an amazing contribution to humanity. And I just support you in everything we can do to help you. And I'm sure the audience also feels the same way. I want to pivot for a moment to Wild Bill Donovan, because that is not a story that I quite understood. So, Ellen, you are known as the Wild Bill Donovan of the future. Explain how that all came about.
You know, Lorraine, I mentioned that I've been reading World War II history and reflecting on the starting of the intelligence community, the origins of the intelligence community, especially with this Russia-Ukraine incident, because the parallels are pretty amazing. But just to give the viewers, who is Wild Bill Donovan? Well, during the advent to World War II, President Roosevelt was really worried that he was not getting a strategic picture of what was happening in Europe. He had intel organizations in the government. Of course, the media was there, but they just didn't have the access to what was going on in Europe. And he really was worried that as we're getting ready for war, the United States is not going to be ready. So he had gone to law school with this guy named Wild Bill Donovan, who was a lawyer, a World War I hero. Bill Donovan has won all 4 of this country's top military awards based on his time in World War I. And that's where he got the surname Wild Bill. He was a lawyer who traveled the world, had friendships and relationships with world leaders around the world. And Roosevelt tapped him because he just thought, this is a man who's actually going to give me the true picture of what's going on. He made Wild Bill the chief of information, his direct advisor, and then he created this organization called the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which in very short time went from 4 people to 15,000 really smart people. They were researchers, librarians, prior military, pilots. And really the cost for joining was that you had to be really smart and you could win at a bar fight. And the OSS operated clandestinely during World War II. They collected information because of Wild Bill's connections to world leaders. He could call just about anybody, to include Winston Churchill. They had a direct line. would provide intelligence reports. They'd also lead, though, in sabotage operations. Virginia Hall, who's another woman, we're working right now to get her a Congressional Medal of Honor, actually ensured that when the U.S. Invaded Normandy, that German supply lines were all but destroyed so that they couldn't be resupplied during that operation. And so the reason I'm going into such detail on him is that it just has struck me as we look at this world of misinformation and disinformation, much like Roosevelt was worried about propaganda, that we need another Wild Bill Donovan. What came out of the OSS was major structural change. We created the Central Intelligence Agency. We created special forces. My old office, the Intelligence and Research Bureau, was created. We need another Wild Bill Donovan, and maybe it's Wild Bill Ellen, someone who's going to say, we've got to switch things up. We've got to disrupt the way we're doing things, and we've got to create some new organizations.
I am just 100% behind you on that, Ellen. I think that's great. You know, there's a question from Hannah from Rochester in New York, which is a very interesting question. And if we can bring that up there, she says freedom of speech is part of your new business. How can you really prove that the news you have reviewed is true?
Well, again, it's so freedom of speech is part of we as a country, that's who we are. That's what our principles, our democratic principles are based on. And so I'm a true believer in free speech. But the problem with free speech also is that you have people who actually share information that is based on untruths, that's based on inaccurate information. With the dawn of social media, it's worse than it's ever been before. You know, people tend to share things that they believe are true. In fact, that's the biggest issue. And the things that they believe are true tend to be the least true. It tends to be information that is very dramatic. It's based on emotion, not based on critical thinking, not based on an analysis of information. And while that's free speech, the problem is that because of social media and the digital age, it just gets sent around in larger and larger quantities. I've seen statistics like something like 80% of what's passed around on social media is based on untrue, not facts-based information. So free speech is good, but it's also led to this environment where we just don't trust anything. So the way you prove that news is true is really, it's very much like the tradecraft we employed in the intelligence community. You look at a source, you verify the source. If you don't have more information, you ask for more information. You look at all sides to an issue. It's almost like you're crowdsourcing information to make sure that what you're looking at really is true. And so the things that we did in the intelligence community can absolutely be applied in the private sector. And the most important component of it is really verifying your sources.
Oh, that is a tough mandate, and something which I know a lot of people don't take the time to do, because it does take time to do it. You know, Ellen, we gave you the audience, a little bit of the snippet of your video when we began the program, but we're going to conclude in a minute or two. And when we do, we're actually going to play the entire video, which I know you played it for the first time at South by Southwest and had something like 37,000 people followed it within seconds. So I just want our audience to know, please don't jump off when I close out the program and tell you about our new show coming up, because that video will be at the end of the program, and it is truly spectacular. Ellen, you're remarkable. I know we're going to keep bringing you back, because as your company, both for-profit and not-for-profit, evolves, we want to know all about it. Thank you so much for your time, for your insights, for your brilliance, and for your service to our country.
Thank you, Lorraine.
I know that you would have loved to hear more from Ellen. I would have too, but I will leave you with a question, and I hope you'll answer this to my email, and that is, how has the Russia-Ukraine war affected your business? Love to hear from you about that, and we'll respond back. And also, if you have any questions, do post them on LinkedIn or Facebook or your other streaming platforms. We have another show coming up shortly in just a few days, and that will be Nina Richardson. She has been on multiple boards. We are going to talk about her incredible technology-based career and how she transitioned from job to job and also into boards. So be sure to join us for that. And of course, I want you to go to YouTube and look at our channel, go to Apple and Spotify. This will be on there, both the recording and a podcast. And do stay on to watch the rest of the video. Thank you all for being with us. This was truly a wonderful show. See you next time, everyone.